My parents kicked me out at 17 and said, "Your brother deserves the future, not you." They gave him my college fund, my room, and my car. So I left with nothing but a half-charged phone. 4 years later, my brother walked into a job interview, and his smile vanished when he saw who was sitting across the table. I, 21M, was 17 years old when my parents decided I wasn't worth the investment anymore. I remember the exact moment because the weather was absurdly perfect that day. Clear sky, cool breeze, the kind of afternoon you remember because your brain decides to photograph everything when your life falls apart. It was a Thursday. I'd come home from school, dropped my bag by the door and walked into the kitchen to find both my parents sitting at the table, not eating, not on their phones, just sitting, waiting. That alone should have told me something was wrong, because my parents were never in the same room voluntarily, unless someone had died or they had a plan. My father told me to sit down. He didn't look at me when he said it. My mother was staring at her hands. My younger brother, 15 at the time, was nowhere in sight, which I later realized was by design. They'd sent him to a friend's house so he wouldn't have to witness what they were about to do. My father started talking, in that flat, rehearsed way people speak when they've practiced something in the mirror. He told me they'd been thinking about the family's future, about finances, about what made sense going forward. He told me my brother had more potential, that my brother was the one with the grades, the ambition, the talent. He told me they'd decided to redirect my college fund, the one my grandmother had set up for me before she passed, into my brother's education. All of it. Every cent. I sat there processing, waiting for the rest. There was more. My mother took over. She told me that my brother needed more space to focus, that sharing a room was holding him back, and that they decided it would be best if I found somewhere else to stay. She said it gently, like she was telling me dinner was going to be late. She told me they'd packed some of my things into a bag. It was already by the front door. I hadn't even noticed it when I walked in. I asked them where they expected me to go. My father told me I was resourceful, and that I'd figure it out. My mother added that this wasn't permanent, that once my brother was settled, maybe we could revisit things. Maybe. That word sat in the air between us like smoke. Then came the part that really broke something inside me. My father told me they were transferring my car. The 10-year-old sedan my grandmother had left me in her will, along with the college fund, into my brother's name. He said my brother would need it more for extracurriculars, for getting around, for building the life they'd envisioned for him. I want to be honest here. My brother wasn't some genius prodigy. He was average. Solid B student. Decent at soccer. Charming in the way that youngest children sometimes are, because they learn early how to perform for adults. But he was my mother's favorite, from the day he was born, and my father went along with whatever my mother wanted, because that was easier than fighting. I was the quiet one. I didn't cause problems, but I didn't sparkle either. I went to school, got B+, worked part-time at a hardware store on weekends, kept my head down. In my family, being low maintenance didn't make you valuable, it made you invisible. And invisible people are easy to sacrifice. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I sat at that table for another 30 seconds, memorizing their faces. And then I stood up, walked to the front door, grabbed the bag they'd packed for me, and left. I checked my phone. 43% battery. No car, no money. 17 years old on a perfect Thursday afternoon, with nowhere to go. I walked for about 2 miles to the gas station near the highway. I sat on the curb outside, and called the only person I could think of. My grandmother's sister. My great-aunt. Lived alone in a small apartment 40 minutes away. And hadn't spoken to my parents in years because of some family falling out I never fully understood. I told her what happened. She was quiet for a long time. Then she told me to wait right there, that she was coming to get me. She picked me up in her old hatchback, brought me to her apartment, made me toast, and told me I could stay as long as I needed. She didn't badmouth my parents. She didn't pity me. She just told me that life was going to test me, and that how I responded would define everything that came next. That woman saved my life. I dropped out of high school 2 months before graduation because I couldn't figure out transportation to my old school from my great-aunt's place. I got my GED instead, which felt like a defeat at the time, but turned out to be irrelevant later. I picked up 2 jobs, stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, and cleaning offices at night. I slept 5 hours if I was lucky. I ate cheap. I saved everything. My great-aunt never charged me rent, but she refused. She told me the only payment she wanted was for me to do something with my life that my parents would never expect. She said it without malice. She said it like it was a prophecy. At 18, I enrolled in community college. I paid for it myself. I discovered something there that I never found in high school. I was actually smart, when someone bothered to care whether I was in the room. I took business courses, aced them, took an intro to programming class on a whim, and something clicked. Code made sense to me in a way that people never did. It was logical, it rewarded effort, it didn't play favorites. I transferred to a state university at 19 with a partial scholarship. I worked the entire time. Freelance web development, tutoring, odd tech jobs. I lived in a room the size of a closet, with a mattress on the floor and a laptop I bought refurbished for $200. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I studied and worked and studied some more. Something was burning inside me, and I couldn't name it at first, but eventually I understood what it was. It wasn't anger, it was refusal. I refused to become what my parents had decided I was: disposable, forgettable, less than. By 20, I caught a break. A startup incubator at the university selected a project I'd been building, a workflow automation tool for small businesses. Nothing revolutionary, but it solved a real problem in a clean way. They gave me seed funding, mentorship, and access to a network I didn't know existed. I worked on it 18 hours a day for 6 months. I pitched to investors. I got rejected 14 times. The 15th said yes. The company grew fast. Not Silicon Valley fast, not headline fast, but steady and real. By the time I was 21, I had 11 employees, a small office in a co-working space downtown, and revenue that would have made my 17-year-old self pass out. I was still the same person, quiet, focused, invisible by choice now instead of by assignment. But the difference was that I owned my invisibility. It was a tool, not a sentence. I heard nothing from my parents. Not a call, not a text, not even a second-hand message through a relative. My great-aunt told me once that my mother had called her, asking if she knew where I was, about a year after I left. My great-aunt told her that I was alive, and that was all she needed to know. My mother apparently didn't push further. I try not to think about what that says about her. My brother, from what little I gathered through social media before I blocked everyone, was living exactly the life my parents had designed for him. He went to a decent university on my grandmother's money. He posted photos of campus life, tailgate parties, spring break trips. He was thriving in the way people thrive when every obstacle has been quietly removed from their path by someone else. I didn't hate him, not exactly. Hate requires a connection, and I'd severed that the day I walked out the door. What I felt was closer to a flat, exhausted indifference. The kind you feel toward a stranger you'll never meet again. Or so I thought. Update 1. About 4 months ago, my company posted an opening for a junior project coordinator. Entry level, decent salary, good benefits. We've been growing, and I needed someone to help manage the workflow between our dev team and our clients. I wasn't usually involved in hiring at that level. My operations manager handled it, but she was out on maternity leave, so I was filling in. I reviewed resumes, scheduled interviews, normal stuff. One resume caught my eye, not because it was impressive, but because the university name triggered a faint recognition. I didn't connect it at first. The name on the resume wasn't unusual. The address was from a city I didn't associate with anyone I knew. Then I saw the last name. I stared at it for a full minute. I checked the graduation year, the degree, the extracurriculars. It was him, applying for a job at my company. Now, here's the thing. My company name doesn't include my name. My name isn't on the website, isn't in any press coverage. I deliberately kept a low profile because that's who I am. There was no way my brother could have known who owned the company. To him, it was just another job listing on a board somewhere. I sat with that resume for 2 days. I could have passed it along. I could have rejected it quietly and moved on. No one would have known. But something in me, that 17-year-old sitting on a curb with 43% battery, wanted to see his face. Not out of cruelty. Out of something I still can't fully name. Closure maybe. Or proof. Proof that I was real, that I'd survived, that the kid they threw away had built a chair worth sitting in. The day came. I sat in the small conference room we used for interviews. Folder open, pen ready. Professional, calm. My assistant brought him in. He walked through the door with that easy confidence I remembered. The posture of someone who'd always been told the path was clear ahead. He was wearing a decent suit, hair combed, handshake ready. He smiled at me as he came around the table. The automatic smile of someone who's rehearsed their first impression. I watched it happen in real time. The smile didn't just fade, it malfunctioned. His eyes went wide, then narrow, then wide again. His hand, already extended for the shake, froze midair. He said my name, not a greeting, just the word, like he was testing whether reality was broken. I stood up, shook his hand anyway, and told him to sit down. I kept it professional. I told him I'd reviewed his resume and had a few questions. He didn't sit immediately. He just stood there, looking at me, looking around the office, then back at me. I could see him doing the math. The company logo on the wall, the fact that I was in the interviewer's chair, the conference room with my name absolutely nowhere in it, but my presence absolutely everywhere. He sat down. He looked pale. I asked him about his degree. He answered, stumbling a little but finding his footing. I asked about his previous experience. He had an internship and a short contract role, nothing substantial, but not unusual for a recent graduate. I asked him what attracted him to the company. He gave a generic answer about growth potential and company culture. The kind of answer you give when you pulled it off the website that morning. I didn't bring up the past, not once. I asked him the same questions I'd asked every other candidate that week. I treated him like a stranger, because that's what he was. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a confrontation, and I wasn't going to give myself the shame of turning this into a spectacle. The interview lasted about 25 minutes. At the end, I thanked him for coming in and told him we'd be in touch. He stood up, but didn't move toward the door. He just stood there, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Something between confusion and something raw, something he probably didn't have a name for either. Then he asked me how I'd done all this. I told him I figured it out, the same thing our father had told me I'd do. He left without saying anything else. Update 2. I didn't hire him. I want to be clear about why. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't spite. His resume genuinely wasn't the strongest in the pool. We had 12 applicants for the position, and 3 of them had more experience, better references, and stronger technical skills. I hired the best candidate, a woman who'd worked her way through college just like me and had a quiet intensity that reminded me of my great aunt. She started 2 weeks later and has been excellent. My brother wasn't rejected because he was my brother. He was rejected because he wasn't the best choice. If he'd been the most qualified person in that stack, I would have hired him. I know that about myself. I'm not interested in being the kind of person my parents were, someone who makes decisions based on favoritism and feelings instead of merit. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a certain satisfaction in it. Not in rejecting him. In the fact that I was the one in the chair. That the kid they threw away was the one who built something. While the kid they'd bet everything on was sitting across the table, hoping for an entry-level position. 3 days after the interview, I got a phone call from my mother. First time in 4 years. She started soft, the way she always did when she wanted something. She asked how I was, told me she'd been thinking about me, said she missed me. I let her talk. Then she got to the point. She told me my brother had come home from the interview shaken, that he told them everything. Who I was, what I built, the office, the company. She told me my father was shocked. She told me they had no idea I'd done so well for myself. Then, she asked me if I could reconsider hiring my brother. She said he was struggling, that the job market was tough, that he'd been looking for months. She told me it would mean a lot to the family if I helped him out. The family. The word landed like a brick. I told her, as evenly as I could manage, that the position had been filled by a more qualified candidate. I told her the hiring process was fair and based on merit. I told her that I wished my brother well in his search. She got quiet. Then she asked me if I was punishing them. I told her no. I told her that punishment would require me to still be angry, and that I wasn't angry anymore. I told her that I had spent 4 years building a life from nothing, and that nothing about my decisions had anything to do with them. I told her they had made their choice about who deserved the future, and I had simply gone out and built my own. She started crying. I don't know if it was guilt or frustration or self-pity, but the sound of it didn't move me the way it would have 4 years ago. I wasn't cold. I just didn't have anything left to give her. That well was dry. I told her I had to go and that I hoped she was doing well. Then, I hung up. Update 3. About 2 weeks after the phone call, my great-aunt passed away. It was sudden. A stroke in her sleep. She went peacefully, which is the only mercy I can find in it. I got the call from her neighbor on a Tuesday morning, and I drove straight to her apartment. I sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd made me toast 4 years ago, and I cried for the first time since the day I left my parents' house. She left a will. It was simple and short. She left me everything. Her apartment, her savings, a box of old family photographs, and a letter. The letter wrecked me. She told me she'd watched me rebuild myself from nothing, and that it was the most extraordinary thing she'd ever seen. She told me that my parents' failure wasn't my fault, and that their choice said everything about them, and nothing about me. She told me she was proud, and that my grandmother would have been proud too. She also told me something I didn't know. My grandmother had originally set up 2 college funds, one for me and one for my brother. Equal amounts. My parents had drained mine and added it to my brother's, giving him double. My great-aunt knew because she'd been the one who helped my grandmother set up the accounts. She'd confronted my parents about it once, and that was the family falling out that had separated them for years. I sat with that information for a long time. My parents came to the funeral. I didn't invite them. They found out through a cousin. I saw them across the small chapel. My mother in black, my father in a gray suit. My brother standing behind them, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. I didn't acknowledge them. I gave the eulogy. I talked about a woman who opened her door for a kid the rest of the world had forgotten, and how that single act of decency had changed the entire trajectory of a life. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't have to. Everyone in that room knew the story. After the service, my brother approached me in the parking lot. He looked different than he had at the interview. Smaller somehow. Less certain. He told me he was sorry. Not about the interview. About everything. He told me he didn't know our parents were going to kick me out that day. That they'd sent him to a friend's house on purpose. He told me that by the time he came home and found out I was gone, my parents had told him I'd chosen to leave. He told me he only learned the truth recently. After the interview, when he started asking questions, and the story fell apart piece by piece. He told me he'd had no idea about the college fund, about the car, about any of it. He told me he felt sick when he found out. I looked at him for a long time. I could see that he meant it. He wasn't performing. He wasn't charming his way through a difficult moment. He was genuinely standing in front of me, 20 years old, realizing that his entire foundation had been built on someone else's wreckage. I told him I believed him. I told him that I didn't blame him for what our parents did, but that I also couldn't pretend we were brothers in any meaningful sense. I told him we were strangers who shared a last name and a childhood that only one of us actually experienced. He nodded. He didn't argue. He asked me if there was any chance we could start over, even slowly. I told him I didn't know. I told him that was honest, and that honest was the best I could offer. He told me that was more than he deserved. We stood there for another moment, and then he walked back to our parents' car. My mother was watching from the passenger seat. My father wouldn't look at me. I got in my own car and drove home. That was 6 weeks ago. My brother has texted me twice since then. Once to tell me he got a job at a small marketing firm. Once to send me a photo he'd found of us as kids, sitting on our grandmother's porch, both of us grinning, before any of this happened. I didn't respond to either text, but I saved the photo. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll ever have a relationship with my brother again. I don't know if my parents will ever acknowledge what they did, or if they'll spend the rest of their lives rewriting the story until they're the victims. Probably the latter. That's what people like them do. What I do know is this: I was 17 with a half-charged phone and a garbage bag of clothes. Not because I'm special or brilliant or destined for greatness, because one person, one 71-year-old woman in a small apartment, decided I was worth something, when the people who were supposed to love me decided I wasn't. My great-aunt told me once that the best thing you can do with pain is use it as fuel. Not to burn other people, to build something warm enough to sit by. I think about that every day. A lot of people are asking about the legal side of the college fund. Yes, I've looked into it. My grandmother's will specifically designated the fund for my education. My parents, as the account custodians, have no legal right to reallocate it. My lawyer is reviewing the documentation my great-aunt left behind. I'm not sure if I'll pursue it. The money would be nice, but honestly, I've already made more than what was in that fund. It's about the principle. I'll update if anything comes of it. Second edit. Thank you for all the kind words about my great-aunt. She deserved better than a Reddit post, but I think she would have gotten a kick out of this many people knowing her story. She was the realest person I've ever known.